The communist movement, having made a big fanfare for over a century, has brought mankind nothing but war, poverty, brutality, and dictatorship. With the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European Communist parties, this disastrous and outrageous drama finally entered its last stage by the end of the last century. No one, from the people to the General Secretary of the CCP, believes in the myth of communism anymore. The communist regime came into being due to neither divine mandate nor democratic election. Today, with its ideology destroyed, the legitimacy of its reign is facing an unprecedented challenge. The Chinese Communist Party is unwilling to leave the historical stage in accordance with the current of history. Instead, it is using the ruthless methods developed during decades of political campaigns to renew its crazed struggle for legitimacy, revive its dead mandate, and continuously provide a living environment for the parasitic evil specter. In this historical moment today, it is especially important for us to understand clearly why the CCP acts like a band of scoundrels and to expose its villainous nature, so that the Chinese nation can achieve lasting stability and peace, enter an era free of the CCP as soon as possible, and construct a future of renewed national splendor. From the policy of improving the treatment for the intellectuals after the Hungarian Revolution in the 1950s, to the policy of plots of land for private use, free markets, and enterprises with responsibility for their own profits and losses, implemented in the rural villages after the Great Famine in the 1960s. From the movement of ideological emancipation after the Great Cultural Revolution in the 1970s, to the deepening reform after the Tiananmen massacre in the 1980s. Throughout history, whenever the CCP encountered crises, it would demonstrate some traces of improvement, enticing people to develop illusions about the CCP. Without exception, though, the illusions were shattered time and time again. Today, the CCP has pursued short-term benefits, and in doing so, has produced a show of economic prosperity that has once again persuaded the people to believe in fantasies about the CCP. Let us look at what the People's Daily, the mouthpiece of the CCP, said in a front-page story on July 12, 2004. Quote, "The historical dialectics have taught the CCP members the following. Those things that should be changed must change. Otherwise, deterioration will follow. Those that should not be changed must remain unchanged. Otherwise, it will lead to self-destruction." What is it that should remain unchanged? The People's Daily explains, quote, "The party's basic line of one center, two basic points must last solidly for 100 years without any vacillation." Unquote. Everything is clear. The communist evil specter's determination to maintain its collective interest and dictatorship never changes. The fundamental conflicts between the interest of the CCP and that of the nation and the people determine that this false prosperity will not last. The reform the CCP has promised has one purpose: to maintain CCP rule. It is a lame reform, a change in surface but not in substance. Underneath the lopsided development lies a great social crisis. Once the crisis breaks out, the nation and the people will suffer once again. It is true that communism has been defeated globally and is doomed to become more and more moribund. Nevertheless, the more corrupt a thing becomes, the more destructive it becomes during its struggle with death. With the change of leadership, the new generation of CCP leaders had no part in the communist revolution. and therefore have less and less prestige and credibility in managing the nation. Amidst the crisis of its legitimacy, the CCP's protection of the party interests has increasingly become the basic guarantee for maintaining the interests of individuals within the CCP. The CCP's nature is selfish. It knows no restraint. To discuss democratic improvements with the Communist Party is like asking a tiger to change its skin. During the conference of the Political Bureau of the CCP Central Committee after the Tiananmen massacre, Deng Xiaoping mentioned two hands, one soft and flexible, and the other hard and stern. This is an analogy for the Communist Party's two-sided strategies. Its softer strategies include propaganda, united fronts, sowing dissension, espionage, instigating rebellion, double-dealing, getting into people's minds, brainwashing, lies and deception, covering up the truth, psychological abuse, and generating an atmosphere of terror. In doing these things, the CCP creates a syndrome of fear inside the people's hearts that leads them to easily forget the party's wrongdoings. These myriad methods could stamp out human nature and foster maliciousness in humanity. The CCP's hard tactics include violence, armed struggle, persecution, political movements, murdering witnesses, kidnapping, suppressing those who have a different opinion, armed attacks, periodic crackdowns, and on and on. These aggressive methods create and perpetuate terror. In practice, the CCP uses both soft and hard methods concurrently. Sometimes they would be relaxed in some instances, while strict in others. Or they would be relaxed on the outside, while stiff in their internal affairs. In a relaxed atmosphere, the CCP encountered the expression of different opinions. But, as if luring a snake out of its hole, those who did speak up would only be persecuted in the following period of strict control. A veteran official who had suffered torments in the Yan'an rectification movement recalled that when he was under intense pressure and was dragged and forced to confess, the only thing he could do was to betray his own conscience and make up lies. At first, he felt bad to be implicating and framing his fellow comrades. He hated himself so much that he wanted to end his own life. Coincidentally, a gun had been placed on the table. He grabbed it, pointed it at his head, and pulled the trigger. But the gun had no bullets. The person who investigated him walked in and said, "It's good that you admitted what you've done was wrong. The party's policies are lenient." The CCP always first puts one in a death trap and then enjoys one's every pain and humiliation. When one reaches the limit and just wishes for death, the party feigns kindness, coming out to show one a way to live. It is said, "Better a live coward than a dead hero." One becomes grateful to the party as one's savior. According to modern medical studies, many victims of intense pressure and isolation fall prey to an abnormal sense of dependency on their captors. This is called the Stockholm Syndrome. The victim's moods, happiness or anger, joy or sorrow, are dictated by those of their captors. The slightest favor for the victims will be received with great gratitude. There are accounts in which the victims develop love for their captors. This psychological phenomenon has been long used successfully by the CCP, both against its enemies and in controlling and remolding the minds of its citizens. The experience of China's last emperor, Puyi, was similar to this officer's. Imprisoned in the CCP cells and seeing people killed one after another, He thought that he would die soon. In order to live, he allowed himself to be brainwashed and cooperated with the prison guards. Later, he wrote an autobiography called The First Half of My Life, which was used by the CCP as a successful example of ideological remolding. At the time of Mao Zedong's death, many Chinese shed a lot of tears in front of Mao's portrait, wondering, how can China continue without Chairman Mao? Ironically, 20 years later, now that the Communist Party has lost the legitimacy to rule the country, the CCP has spread a new round of propaganda, trying to make the people again worry. What would China do without the Communist Party? In reality, the CCP's all-pervasive political control has so deeply branded the current Chinese culture and the Chinese mindsets that even the criteria with which the Chinese people judge the CCP have the mark of the CCP, or have even come from the CCP. If, in the past, the CCP controlled people by instilling its elements into them, then the CCP has now come to harvest what it sowed. Since the things instilled in people's minds have been digested and absorbed into their very cells, people think following CCP logic and put themselves in the CCP's shoes in judging right and wrong. Regarding the CCP massacre of student protesters on June 4, 1989, some people said, "If I were Deng Xiaoping, I would have stopped the protest with tanks too." In the persecution of Falun Gong, some people are saying, "If I were Jiang Zemin, I would eliminate Falun Gong too." About the ban on free speech, some people are saying, "If I were the CCP, I would do the same." Truth and conscience have vanished, leaving only the CCP logic. This has been one of the vilest and most ruthless methods used by the CCP, true to its unscrupulous nature. As long as the moral toxins instilled by the CCP remain in people's minds, the CCP can continue to gain energy to sustain its sinful life. The question, what would China do without the CCP? This mode of thinking fits the CCP's aim of having people reason using party logic. The decades of CCP propaganda have trained people to think of the party as their mother. The omnipresent CCP politics have rendered people unable to even conceive of living without the CCP. Without Mao Zedong, China did not fall. Will China collapse without the CCP? The CCP's claim to legitimacy lies in the economic development over the past 20-some years. But, tracing it back throughout history, the reform in Chinese rural villages in Anhui province was initiated by the peasants themselves. The reform in the cities came from requests by business leaders to loosen government restrictions. In reality, these developments were gradually achieved by the Chinese people after the fetters of the CCP were slightly relaxed, and therefore have nothing to do with the CCP's own merit. There are two supervisory systems in China. One is the administrative system, and the other is the party system. The administrative system exists to solve social problems and to facilitate the development of society. But the party system, which does not attend to its proper duties, attaches to the administrative system as a parasitic evil specter, controlling the administrative system and taking credit for the achievements of people's hard work. It has become a malignant tumor growing in the Chinese society. The CCP has, however, claimed this economic development as its own achievement, asking people to be grateful for it, as if none of these developments would have taken place without the CCP. We all know, though, that many non-communist countries achieved faster rates of economic growth a long time ago. The CCP attributes anything bad to reactionary forces and the ulterior motives of certain individuals, while crediting everything good to the party leadership. For example, the winners of Olympic gold medals are required to thank the party, and the party then congratulates itself as a great nation of sports. China suffered a great deal in the SARS epidemic, but the party mouthpiece, the People's Daily, reported that China defeated the virus by, quote, relying on the party's basic theory, basic line, basic principle, and basic experience, unquote. The launch of China's spaceship, Shenzhou 5, was accomplished with the help of professionals in science and technology, but the CCP used it as evidence to prove that only the CCP could lead the Chinese people to enter the ranks of the powerful countries in the world. As for China's hosting of the 2008 Olympic Games, what was in reality an olive branch given by Western countries to encourage China to improve its human rights, the CCP uses the Games to enhance its claims to legitimacy and to provide a pretext for suppressing the Chinese people. Even the wrongdoing that the CCP commits can be turned into something good to serve the party's purposes. In the early 1990s, for example, the selling of blood became popular in mainland China. The county and town governments made slogans such as, "If you want to be comparatively well off, just go sell your blood." Another was, "Selling blood is honorable." They contrived these slogans to encourage peasants to sell their blood. In the poor rural villages, sanitary conditions are very bad, and there is usually no medical examination prior to drawing the blood. As a result, many peasants have been infected with AIDS. In Henan province alone, hundreds of AIDS-infected villages have emerged, and about 1 million people have been infected with HIV. But the CCP has treated the spread of AIDS as a state secret and forbids investigation. A grassroots-level official even openly said, quote, "The AIDS patients are not human, they are ghosts. When they all die, the AIDS problem will be over." Unquote. When, through the great efforts of some medical workers and the international society, the truth about the rampant spread of AIDS in China could no longer be covered up, the CCP suddenly created a new identity. It carefully mobilized its propaganda machine, utilizing everyone from well-known actors to the party's general secretary, in order to falsely portray the prime culprit, the CCP, as a blessing for the patients, a destroyer of AIDS, and a challenger to disease. In dealing with such a serious life-and-death issue, all the CCP could think of was how to use the issue to glorify itself. Only a schemer as vicious as the CCP is capable of such ruthless behavior, brazenly and underhandedly taking credit and utterly disregarding human life. In fact, China's economic improvement has nothing to do with the CCP. In order to maintain its rule, the CCP carried out the policies of reform and opening up in the 1980s. Its eagerness for quick success has placed China at a disadvantage, termed by economists as the curse of the latecomer. The concept of the curse of the latecomer, or as some other scholars call it, the latecomer advantage, refers to the fact that underdeveloped countries, which set out late for development, can imitate the developed countries in many aspects. This imitation can take two forms: imitating the social system or imitating the technological and industrial models. Imitating a social system is usually very difficult, since system reform would endanger the vested interests of social or political groups. Thus, underdeveloped countries are inclined to imitate developed countries' technologies. Although technological imitation can generate short-term economic growth, it may result in many hidden risks or even failure in long-term development. It is precisely the curse of the latecomer, a path to failure, that the CCP has followed. Over the past 2 decades, China's technological imitation has led to some achievements, which have been taken by the CCP for its own advantage, in order to prove its legitimacy and to enable it to continue to resist political reform that would undermine the CCP's own interests. Thus, the long-term interests of the nation have been sacrificed. In comparison, since abandoning communism, Russia has carried out economic and political reforms. After experiencing a short period of agony, it has now embarked on a path of rapid growth and development. From 1999 to 2003, Russia's GDP increased by a total of 30%. The living standards for its residents have significantly improved. Western business circles have begun not only to discuss the Russian economic phenomenon, but have also begun to invest in Russia, the new hotspot, on a large scale. Russia's rank among the most attractive nations for investments has jumped from 17th in 2002 to 8th in 2003, becoming one of the world's top 10 most popular nations for investment for the first time. Even India, a country that, to most Chinese, is poverty-stricken and full of ethnic conflicts, has enjoyed a significantly expedited development and has achieved an economic growth rate of 7 to 8% per year since its economic reforms in 1991. India has a relatively complete legal system and a market economy. It has a healthy financial system, a well-developed democratic system, and a stable public mentality. The international community has recognized India as a country of great development potential. On the other hand, the CCP engages in economic reform without political reform. The resulting false appearance of an economy that flourishes in the short run has hindered the advancement of society. The partial reforms have caused an increasing imbalance in Chinese society and sharpened social conflicts. The financial gains people are achieving are not protected by stable social systems. And furthermore, in the process of privatizing the state-owned properties, the CCP's power holders have abused their positions to fill their own pockets. While the CCP constantly brags about its economic advancement, in reality, China's economy today ranks lower in the world than during Qianlong's reign in the Qing dynasty. During the Qianlong period, which was in the 1700s, China's GDP accounted for 51% of the world total. When Dr. Sun Yat-sen founded the Republic of China, the KMT period, in 1911, China's GDP accounted for 27% of the world total. By 1923, the percentage dropped, but still was as high as 12%. In 1949, when the CCP took control, the percentage was 5.7%. But in 2003, China's GDP was less than 4% of the world's total. In contrast to the economic decline during the KMT period, that was caused by several decades of war, the continuing economic decline during the CCP reign occurred during times of peace. The rapid economic growth in the past 20 years is, to a large extent, built on the excessive use or even waste of resources, and has been gained at the cost of environmental destruction. According to Xinhua News Agency, in 2003, China contributed less than 4% to the world economy, but its consumption of steel, cement, and other materials amounted to 1/3 of the total global consumption. A considerable portion of China's GDP is achieved by squandering the resources and opportunities that should be left to future generations. From the 1980s to the end of the 1990s, desertification in China has increased from a little over 1,000 to 2,460 square kilometers. The per capita arable land decreased from about 2 mu in 1980 to 1.43 mu in 2003. The widespread upsurge in the conversion of farmland to land for development has led China to lose 100 million mu of arable land in just a few years' time. However, only 43% of the confiscated land is actually used. Currently, the total amount of wastewater discharge is 44 billion tons, exceeding the environmental capacity by 82%. In the 7 major river systems, over 40% of the water is not suitable for drinking by humans or livestock. 75% of the lakes are so polluted as to produce various degrees of eutrophication. The direct result of eutrophication in the lakes is the large-scale death of fish populations. It also has adverse effects on industry, personal health, and the water used for irrigation. The conflicts between man and nature in China have never been as intense as they are today. Neither China nor the world can withstand such unhealthy growth. Deluded by the superficial splendor of high-rises and mansions, people are unaware of the impending ecological crisis. Once the time comes for nature to exact its toll on human beings, however, it will bring disastrous consequences to the Chinese nation. The CCP relied on peasants to gain power. The rural residents in the CCP-controlled areas, in the early stage of its buildup, devoted all they had to the CCP. But since the CCP obtained control of the country, peasants have experienced severe discrimination. After the CCP established the government, it set up a very unfair system, the residential registration system. This system arbitrarily classifies people into rural and urban populations, creating an unreasonable separation and opposition within the country. Peasants have no medical insurance, no unemployment welfare, no retirement pensions, and cannot take loans from banks. Peasants are not only the most impoverished class in China, they also carry the heaviest tax burden. Peasants need to pay a mandatory Provident Fund, Public Welfare Fund, Administrative Management Fund, extra education fee, birth control fee, militia organization and training fees, country road construction fees, military service compensation fees, and in addition to all these, they are also required to sell a portion of the grains they produce to the state at an artificially low fixed rate. They must pay agricultural tax, land tax, special local produce tax, and butchery tax, in addition to numerous other levies. In contrast, the urban population does not pay these taxes and fees. In a tree farm in eastern Sichuan province, upper-level authorities distributed 500,000 yuan for a reforestation project. The leaders of the tree farm put the first 200,000 yuan into their own pockets and allocated the remaining 300,000 yuan to tree planting. But when passing through each level of the government, more and more of the money was taken away, and in the end very little was left for the peasants who did the actual tree planting. Those in the government didn't need to worry about the peasants refusing to work on the project, though. the peasants were so impoverished that they would work for very little money. This is one of the reasons that products made in China are so cheap. Many people believe that trade with China will promote human rights, freedom of speech, and democratic reform in China. After more than a decade, though, it is clear that this assumption is only wishful thinking. A comparison of the principles of doing business in China and in the West provides a good example. The fairness and transparency of Western societies are replaced in China by nepotism, bribery, and embezzlement. Whether China decides to buy new aircraft from France or the United States depends on which country keeps quiet on the CCP's human rights issues. Many Western businessmen and politicians are driven and controlled by economic profits from China. Some information technology companies from North America have supplied specialized products to the CCP to block the Internet. In order to gain entry to the Chinese market, some Internet websites have agreed to censor themselves and filter out information disliked by the CCP. This huge blood transfusion to the CCP economy from foreign capital is very apparent. But in the process of investment, foreign capital did not bring with it the concept of democracy, freedom, and human rights as fundamental principles for the Chinese people. In its propaganda, the CCP boasts about the unconditional cooperation and even flattery given by foreign investors and foreign governments for the CCP. By making use of China's superficial economic prosperity, CCP officials have become extremely adept at colluding with businesses to divide state wealth and block political reforms.